Welcome to the first episode of the Podcast of Strangeness, where we explore everything strange, mysterious, and just plain weird. Today is all about UFO tropes, where they came from, and how they probed their way into pop culture. If you're new here and you enjoy mysteries and the paranormal, consider subscribing. On this channel, Mysterious Mysteries, I release full documentaries as well as this podcast. Now let's start right off with the tropiest of UFO tropes, little green men. The term has been in use for quite some time, but it was popularized in the 1940s and 1950s. One of the earliest mentions of green people would be the green children of Woolpit, and this legend, it's folklore, but it allegedly happened around 1150 AD. Two children, a boy and a girl, just kind of appeared out of nowhere near the village of Woolpit in England. They had green skin, wore strange clothes, and spoke a language that no one recognized, just total gibberish. Even weirder, they refused to eat anything except for raw green beans, of course. A local man named Richard de Caulnay took them in, and he managed to shift their diet to something a bit more normal. Once they stopped eating just raw green beans, their green skin faded. Because you are what you eat, I guess. As they learned to speak English, they told people that they came from a land with no sun, where it was always twilight. So, Inner Earth, anyone? Sadly, tragically, the boy died from some unknown illness. However, the girl lived, she grew up, she got married, and had at least one child. But is the story true? Maybe, maybe not, but here's a theory that does make some sense. There is a real condition called sulfamoglobinemia. It's caused by exposure to sulfur, and it literally turns your blood green. And it can tint the skin green as well. The good news is it goes away in about 120 days, as long as you stay away from sulfur and stop eating a diet of nothing but raw green beans. But guess where sulfur naturally occurs? Deep within the earth. I'm telling you, these kids totally came from Inner Earth. Although the story of the green children is pretty interesting, it really doesn't count as a little green men trope, I would say, because it's not really aliens. It's just kids who were green and then turned back to a normal color. Our criteria is specifically little green men in relation to aliens. The term little green men actually started appearing in short stories throughout the 1800s and early 1900s. Not always alien related, but definitely strange. There's The Little Green Man, a German story by Matthew Lewis in 1801. Green Boy from Hera in 1899. The Little Green Man in 1907 references 10 little green men from the moon. So we're getting a lot closer. But the first real usage that clearly refers to extraterrestrial beings shows up in a 1934 pulp magazine story titled Moon Crystals by J.H. Haggard. The aliens from that story are in Venus and are described as having greenish wax-like flesh, a small head, slender pointed ears, bulging pink glazed eyes. This description sounds a lot like the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter from 1955, if you ask me. But from that point on, little green men became a common trend in pulp magazine stories and early sci-fi novels. So in the context of extraterrestrials, the phrase little green men definitely originates from the 1930s through 50s pulp short story magazines. Those were probably influenced by earlier folklore like the Green Children of Woolpit. Or, goblins or something. Actually, goblins weren't really portrayed as green until somewhat recently, which was surprising to me because I've always seen green goblins. Next came the flying saucer craze of 1947 and everything that followed. People naturally associated aliens with little green men because that's how they'd already seen them in fiction. By the 1950s, the phrase had turned into a cliché, used more to mock and dismiss stories of UFOs and aliens. That mocking tone was amplified by the media, comic books, TV, cartoons, and skeptical news coverage. And let's be honest, that's pretty much all there was. Just like that, Little Green Men went from pulp sci-fi to a punchline. And skeptics still use it to this day to belittle believers. That'll do it for Little Green Men. The next trope we're diving into, cow abductions. You know the image, a flying saucer hovering over a moonlit pasture, lifting a cow into the sky with a glowing tractor beam. It's iconic, it's absurd, and unfortunately it's everywhere. But where did this idea actually come from? The earliest recorded case I could find dates all the way back to 1897 when a cigar-shaped UFO allegedly abducted a calf from a farm in Kansas. The next day, a neighbor found the animal's butchered remains, but no tracks anywhere around. So yeah, that's actually also the first recorded cattle mutilation. Here's how Alexander Hamilton, not the founding father, the farmer, described the incident.
Last Monday night about 10:30, we were awakened by a noise among the cattle. I rose thinking perhaps my bulldog was performing pranks, but upon going to the door, saw to my utter astonishment that an airship was slowly descending upon my cow lot about 40 rods from the house.
Eventually, Hamilton says the airship hovered over the calf who was stuck in a fence. It had some kind of rope or material around its neck, the calf did, and that rope was leading back up to the UFO, apparently. They couldn't untangle it, so they just cut the fence to release the calf, and then watched as the cow and the airship rose into the night sky. The next day, the neighbor found the hide, legs, and head of the calf. Like I said, no footprints around, no blood. It was as if something had butchered the cow somewhere else and then just dropped it from the sky. But here's the twist. In 1976, a researcher for 40 and Times interviewed Ethel L. Shaw, who was then 93 years old, who had lived in the town at the time of that incident. She said that Hamilton was a known teller of tall tales and an upstanding member of the local Liars Club. Even earlier than that, in 1943, a former newspaper editor, Edward F. Hudson, admitted that he and Hamilton had made up the whole story. Hamilton himself reportedly told people it was a hoax right up to his death in 1912. So, yeah, the first cow abduction story, it was all just one big hoax. Also, if these are advanced extraterrestrial beings who are visiting here, why did they use a rope? No tractor beam? Moving on to more credible cases of cow abductions. In 1974, amidst an uptick in cattle mutilation cases, multiple Nebraska farmers reported seeing UFOs in the sky on the same nights their cattle showed up missing and then were found mutilated. UFO researchers flagged these as possible signs of direct involvement, even though no one said they witnessed a cow being beamed up. But let's be honest, those aliens, obsessed with cows, probably obsessed with milk, I don't trust them. Next, we have the hypnotic regression of Myrna Hansen in 1980. UFO researcher Paul Benowitz investigated a case involving a woman named Myrna Hansen who reported seeing two massive, silent, flying objects hovering over a meadow, each roughly the size of a Goodyear blimp. At first, it sounded like just a standard UFO sighting, but under hypnotic regression, things got a little spicy. Myrna claimed that she saw a cow being lifted into a hovering craft by a glowing tractor beam. She also described being taken into the craft herself, and what followed became part of a much larger and more controversial narrative that Benowitz would obsess over for the rest of his life, Dulce Base. But that is a whole other can of worms for another time. Now, it's not so much of a trope. I mean, it kind of is, but we also have to look at cattle mutilations. No, we're not actually going to look at them, though. That would be totally gross. But let's discuss. Unexplained cattle mutilations have been going on for centuries. Ranchers have stumbled upon carcasses with their organs removed and surgical precision cuts and blood completely drained, but no footprints around, no blood on the ground. Again, like something mutilated the cow somewhere else and then just dropped it from the sky. It is odd how similar these real cattle mutilations are to that 1897 hoax. According to History.com, between April and October of 1975, nearly 200 cases were reported in Colorado alone. By 1979, thousands of similar cases had been documented across the American heartland, prompting for a formal FBI investigation. But in 1980, the FBI closed the case, concluding that none of the reported cases had involved what appeared to be mutilations by any other means than common predators, which understandably did not sit well with the ranchers, many of whom who had been doing this all of their lives, spent their entire lives tending to livestock, and they knew full well the difference between a scavenger wound or a medical surgical precision cut. And honestly, I side with the ranchers on this. It's their livelihood. They know what they're doing. They know what they're looking at. The FBI are also good with what they do, but they also need to take expert opinion. Obviously, most of the experts are saying that's not what a predator attack looks like. The fact is, mysterious cattle mutilations continue to happen to this day. Now, I'm not saying it's aliens, but I am saying it is undeniably happening. Over 10,000 cases have been reported in at least 15 U.S. states since the early 1970s. That does not even include international cases. So, where did the cow abduction cliché come from? The trope emerged from a combination of eyewitness accounts as well as the whole cattle mutilation phenomena that's been going on since the 60s. So, obviously skeptics see the absurd mental image of a cow being tractor beamed up into a UFO, and they latch onto it and use it to ridicule. Is it funny? Yes, definitely it's very funny, but it doesn't help the conversation. It basically just shuts it down before it begins. Unfortunately, the next trope, we do have to talk about it, alien probing. You know where. Don't worry, we're not going to linger on it. So when I very first started researching this trope, I assumed it was total fabrication, like just basically something cooked up by the skeptics who had heard of people being abducted and people who had said that they had had examinations, medical examinations and experiments done on them, and they just kind of cooked this one up to belittle these people who had these experiences. But to my surprise, a number of abductees actually did describe being probed in that very way, including none other than Barney Hill from one of the most famous alien abduction accounts of all time, the Betty and Barney Hill incident of 1961. So yes, as bizarre as it sounds, the origins of this trope do trace back to real accounts of alien probes. The idea was not pulled out of thin air, it was pulled out of hypnotic regressions as well as first-hand accounts. Over time, again, the media and skeptics latched onto it and turned it into a joke. It's actually become quite a reliable evasion tactic for skeptics, a way to ridicule and dismiss the entire topic of alien abductions without engaging in any real serious discussion. No analysis, no follow-up, just a butt joke and a smirk. I feel like we're just back in middle school. So now we've looked at these tropes and where they came from. We've also seen how skeptics have shaped these tropes into a tool of ridicule. With that in mind, we have to end with something big, the Robertson panel report. So this is a declassified report. The Robertson panel was a CIA-sponsored committee that convened in January 1953. It was led by physicist Howard P. Robertson and tasked with evaluating whether UFOs posed any threat to national security and what, if anything, should be done about it. First of all, why can this committee decide what the rest of us are allowed to know? The panel reviewed only 23 cases out of 2,331 UFO sightings on record at the time. That's just barely 1%. Their conclusion, UFOs didn't pose a threat to national security. That just sounds like deja vu to me because that's what's happening right now. The Pentagon is saying there is no threat to national security. But the Robertson panel says UFOs could become a problem by causing public panic or clogging up military communication channels with UFO reports and stuff like that. The panel made a recommendation not to investigate UFOs any further, but to debunk. Yes, you heard that right. Their recommendation was to debunk UFOs. Strip the unidentified flying objects of the special status they have been given and the aura of mystery they have unfortunately acquired. Their plan to do this? A broad educational program with two major aims, training and debunking. It's right there in black and white. But wait, there's more. They suggested teaching the public to identify things like aircraft, reflections, meteors, and balloons. That's great. That way people can see what those look like in the sky and not confuse them with real UFOs. I like that idea. But more importantly, they wanted to reduce public interest in flying saucers altogether. And how would they do it? This education could be accomplished by mass media such as television, motion pictures, and popular articles. They even recommended involving psychologists familiar with mass behavior, advertising experts skilled in persuasive messaging, and yes, Walt Disney Studios, by name, in this report. They want to use basically TV, movies, Walt Disney cartoons, and the media in order to purposefully just debunk as much as they can to make the public less interested in real UFOs. The panel also warned that civilian UFO research groups should be monitored, secretly monitored, because of their potential to shape public opinion in the event of a possible mass UFO sighting in the future, which clearly they thought could happen or it wouldn't be in the report. If there is a possibility of like mass UFO sightings and you're working to disinform the public about that, you're even monitoring civilian UFO research groups in order to suppress that information. This all seems really wrong. And it is definitely a real conspiracy, and it's declassified and you can read it. I'm going to link that in the description box. Download it and read it. So just let that sink in. The US government officially recommended using media and pop culture to reshape the public's perception of UFOs. And then they carried out that plan behind the scenes, covertly, for decades. And it worked. That's why we have these tropes. It's all part of the plan. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but really if you look at this document and you read what their plan was that they put into effect in the 50s, and you look at everything that's happened in the media regarding UFOs from the 50s to now, it's basically been nothing but shutting it down and making it a joke, or debunking as quickly as you possibly can. I kind of really strongly dislike the idea of debunking like what Mick West does, because his goal, and people like him, their goal is to debunk whatever they possibly can in whatever way they can. So if there is a possible solution to it, even if it's not the right solution, if they can think up any possible solution to what this is, then that is taken as fact and the whole thing is debunked. And I just don't like that, because then you don't look at, like, I know that Mick West does not take eyewitness testimony into account. He just looks at other things and he doesn't listen to people who were actually there. And that is not very good investigation, if you ask me. So the next time someone says little green men and Snickers, don't blame them entirely. After all, they were programmed to say it. Thank you for listening to this podcast, or watching if you were watching on YouTube. I do have a lot of visual elements that I will put up in the YouTube videos. You can find a list of all the sources that I used in order to get all this information and compile this podcast. I don't use AI, I use real human sources. Also in the description on YouTube, you will find some files. In this video, it's going to be the Robertson panel report, the complete declassified. I'm going to link it. It's on the Black Vault. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. Until the next one, question everything.